Hello everyone, and thank you for this opportunity. I've just returned to Australia after 2 weeks in Timor Leste. Let me highlight just 3 remarkable things about a journey that many make these days, but sometimes without appreciating its significance or grim irony. First, I used an Indonesian airline to fly into Timor Leste from Indonesia. Not long ago, Timor-Leste and Indonesia were at war, foreigners were not welcome, and planes from Indonesia might well be fighter jets. Second, I landed at what is now called Nicolau Lobato International Airport in Dili, the capital of Timor-Leste. Not long ago, the Timorese leader Nicolau Lobato was Indonesia's most wanted terrorist. Third, I spent my 2 weeks at the country's new Centro Nacional Chega, a state-sponsored institute of memory established last year to help Timor-Leste and Indonesia learn from their past. Not long ago, an institution mandated to talk about the embarrassing past would have been shut down as criminal subversion. How has Timor-Leste made it to this point, where it is now at peace with its former tormentor and enjoying the benefits of that new relationship, and at peace with itself? The achievement of peace between tiny, isolated Timor-Leste and US-backed giant Indonesia after nearly 3 decades of military occupation is amazing and improbable. At one level, it was due to the fighting spirit of the Timorese people, not the size of the dog in the fight, but the size of the fight in the dog. At another level, it was due to a mix of principle and pragmatism. The Timorese resistance rightly presented its cause as an anti-colonial struggle for the UN-recognised right to self-determination. This gave it the moral and legal high ground over Indonesia, and after much suffering, ultimately paid off in a UN-sponsored referendum in 1999, at which 78% of Timorese voted to Brexit from Indonesia. Indonesia, a new democracy after 3 decades of military dictatorship and anxious to restore its status on the world stage, accepted the result. In return, and keen to draw on Indonesia's economic capacity to rebuild their shattered country, the Timor-Leste leadership opted not to press charges against Indonesia. It also collaborated with Indonesia to preempt the possibility of an international tribunal by establishing a joint truth commission called Comisión Verdad e Amizade, CVR. These overtures between former enemies are sometimes marketed as an example of reconciliation deserving of international emulation. They have delivered much needed peace and many practical benefits to both countries, but the achievement should not be overstated. It has also involved substantial compromise on the part of Timor-Leste, allowed crimes against humanity and war crimes to go unpunished, frustrated victims, and failed to challenge unhealthy denialism about the past in Indonesia. Having achieved peace with Indonesia, Timor-Leste then had to secure peace at home. Civil war in 1975, ideological conflict, abuses during the war with Indonesia, and enmities between those who opposed and those who collaborated with Indonesia left deep divisions and trauma. Left unaddressed, these grievances would likely generate payback and revenge that would prolong conflict and undermine the building of the new nation. In response, 2 ad hoc justice initiatives were taken in Timor-Leste. A hybrid court was established to address serious crimes, murder, rape, torture, and the like, and a Truth and Reconciliation Commission to address less serious crimes and facilitate reconciliation between perpetrators and victims. In the time available, let me make just 3 comments about the Truth Commission process. Known in Portuguese as Comissão de Acolhimento, Verdade e Reconciliação, or CRVR, The Commission was tasked with establishing the truth without fear or favour about human rights violations committed during the period 1974 to 1999, that is, the years covering the Civil War and the Indonesian occupation. This bold decision, almost unique in the region, was universally supported in Timor Leste. It included naming the names of those allegedly responsible. It took evidence from nearly 10,000 victims, leaders, witnesses and experts, held public hearings and concluded that Timor-Leste had suffered crimes against humanity and war crimes and that the Indonesian military was mainly responsible. It also concluded that the Timorese resistance had committed human rights violations and war crimes, though on a far smaller scale than Indonesia. It recommended that those allegedly responsible for serious crimes be referred to their respective courts in Timor-Leste or Indonesia, or failing acceptable action by Indonesia, that the UN establish an international tribunal. Though limited, only Timor-Leste has taken acceptable judicial action. The evidence, however, remains on the record. The CAVR findings are available in a multilingual 5-volume report described as a gift to humanity by one Indonesian politician and have been disseminated widely, also in comic book exhibition and online formats. The primary evidence is archived at a former political prison used by CAVR as its office. My second comment relates to the reconciliation process facilitated by CAVR. Coming immediately after the brutality and terror of 1999, this was an innovative and effective contribution to community-level peace and justice in Timor-Leste. Some highlights. The process was intra-Timorese. It did not involve Indonesians. They had repatriated to Indonesia, and without Indonesia's cooperation, which was not forthcoming, they were beyond the reach of Timor-Leste's criminal jurisdiction. Second, only Timorese who had collaborated with Indonesia and committed so-called less serious crimes in 1999 were eligible. Third, the process was voluntary, but required that participants make a full written statement and be cleared by the prosecutor to use the CAVR option. Though hesitant at first, perpetrators welcomed the option, principally because it offered them acolhimento, or reintegration back into the communities they had offended. Nothing is more important than community in an interrelated clan society like Timor-Leste. Perpetrators had to repeat their confessions to victims and the community, answer questions from them, and satisfy that they were genuinely remorseful, would not re-offend, and would carry out a sanction. CAVR facilitated some 1,400 cases. Critical to the success of these procedures were the use of traditional ritual, the presence of traditional leaders, and the use of simple locations free of the formality of courtrooms. Also critical was the opportunity by perpetrators and victims to hear from each other what was done and its impact on victims and the community. Like the story of the prodigal son in the Gospels, ceremonies were often followed by festive rejoicing. My final point relates to the often problematic, highly political final phase of a Truth Commission's work, namely getting recommendations implemented. It has taken 11 years and much nudging by civil society and some compromises to get Timor-Leste to act on the CAVR recommendations. Last year, however, the government set up the Institute of Memory that I visited recently. It aims to be a hub of post-conflict best practice in the region. Its mandate is to facilitate the implementation of both CAVR and CVR recommendations. It will focus on caring for victims, survivors, memorialising and using the past to educate Timor-Leste's post-conflict generation in human rights and non-violence. Remarkably, it will also collaborate with Indonesia to study its shared history with Timor Leste and extract important lessons to preempt a recurrence of past violence. Despite some shortcomings, Timor Leste is a trailblazer on transitional justice in its part of the world. Its example has contributed to similar initiatives in places like Sri Lanka, Aceh, the Solomon Islands, and Australia's Aboriginal leaders are also studying it. It also remains a challenge to those societies in the region reluctant to engage in reconciliation, face their pasts, or recognise their victims. I hope this has been useful, and I wish you every success and blessing in your work for reconciliation and justice in your beautiful country. Thank you.